And we welcome you into another visual/audio, Kenneth, edition of the Locked On Stars podcast. This is our third one. We're like video pros at this point. I love being on camera right now.
Yeah, I feel like it throws you off every time you have to do an intro, though, for a video.
It does.
A video podcast.
But I'm bridging the gap. We're getting better at it. We're getting more fluid with it in terms of just in doing audio versus audio and visual. But regardless, we've got this going. Things are looking good, and we're off and running here on this Thursday. Happy Thursday, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you're all staying safe and healthy. I'm Josh Clark, the Dallas correspondent at NHL.com, joined as always by, there we go. We got it.
Got it.
My co-host. For all of our audio-only tune-in listeners, listeners. We'll just say listeners.
Listeners. You listen to an audio only.
Well, yeah, that's why it's just kind of redundant to say audio only. But for all of our people on just audio, that whole mini celebration there was me getting the direction that I point towards Kenneth down on our dual box. So making strides here, the Locked On Stars podcast. But happy Thursday, everybody. Hope you're all doing well and staying safe, as I said. Hope you're not going too crazy yet after what's been a pretty crazy week in the United States, Kenneth. We've had.
What's going on?
I don't know. I heard that the restaurant down the street has half-price burgers now, so that's pretty big. But I think that's about it for the extent of news this week in the country and in Dallas. But anyways, there's also news to talk about with the Dallas Stars, Kenneth. Who would have guessed? You know, in early November, we would be talking about the first month of the season. And now we're talking about 1 month into the offseason. We actually have news to discuss and news to break down.
Yep.
And pretty substantial news. Of course, right before the end of October, we had the Ulis Honka signing. Rick Bowness was officially named head coach of the team. And the new blackout third alternate jerseys were revealed. And now we have news on the injury side of things. Now, part of this news is a shock, Kenneth. It came out on Tuesday. The Stars issued a press release, and part of it came as a shock. Part of it we expected. But overall, there's two big names that we have to talk about. Tyler Sagan and Ben Bishop, both mentioned in this press release by the Stars on Tuesday. So the press release reads as follows. The Dallas Stars have issued the following updates on offseason surgeries for goaltender Ben Bishop and center Tyler Sagan. Bishop underwent right knee surgery to repair a torn meniscus performed by Dr. Matthew Matava at Washington University Orthopedics in Chesterfield, Missouri on October 21st. The rehabilitation and recovery time is approximately 5 months from the date of the surgery. Sagan underwent a right hip arthroscopy and labral repair performed by Dr. Brian Kelly at the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York on November 2nd. The rehabilitation and recovery time is approximately 5 months from the date of the surgery. So, Kenneth, we expected Tyler Sagan news. Jim Nill had said it during his end-of-season media availability when he was going through that long, grueling list of player injuries that have been sustained and suffered throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. He had said Tyler Sagan, tore a labrum in his hip and was going to need surgery that was going to require. Jim Nill initially said the window was probably around 4 months recovery time. But then telling us why Ben Bishop had missed the playoffs, the explanation and the response at the time was he had a minor surgery on his knee in May, just before the return to play, and had come back, just wasn't feeling 100% throughout camp. As we said, started 3 games for the Stars in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and they, as Nil said, just didn't feel right, didn't feel 100%, so they ended up just shutting him down, letting Anton Khudobin take the reins. Mm-hmm. But we didn't expect Ben Bishop to be out 5 months, and even Tyler Sagan, we expected, Jim Nill said, the 4-month timetable, and now we're at 5 months. This is two very noteworthy pieces of news and updates for two of the Stars' best players.
Yeah, it is. It's a blow, right? And obviously the Sagan news was anticipated. I think the 5-month timeline that we were given was maybe a little bit frustrating for fans, just because there was some hope that he might be able to come back in more of a 4-month span, which I know 4 to 5 months, all of it sounds long. Right. But you're talking about potentially, he could go from, depending on when this starts, he could go from missing almost none of the season to missing a good, healthy chunk. I mean, you're talking about now, you miss anywhere from, a month to 2 months of the season, maybe even more, depending on when this thing gets going, because he's going to be out through now March, most of March at least. That was a blow just to see that timeline. But the Ben Bishop news was interesting, and even more, I guess, more of a blow for Stars fans because it kind of came out of nowhere. We didn't, I was sitting on Twitter, I was scrolling through, keeping up with, everything else going on in the world.
What else
you
is
just
going
runs
on in the
across
world, Kenneth?
just a minor election here in the U.S. for
City
all of
council?
our
City council?
city council
Okay.
election. That's what I was
Cool.
following
Cool.
on Twitter days in advance. But anyways, scrolling
Big
through
election.
and I think I saw Matt DeFrank's tweet.
Yeah.
The Ben Bishop and Tyler Sagan. I did I scrolled through it because I thought it was just the Sagan news, and I was like, yeah, I knew that. And then I did like a double take, and I just scroll back down. And I was like, wait a second, Ben Bishop's out for 5 months.
Yep.
On the face, that's a blow for this Stars team that still, regardless of what they were able to do in the postseason, is very, 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 very much built on the fact that they would or should or most of the time do have two of the best goalies in the NHL. And now you're talking about Ben Bishop being out, who when he's in, it's not a question. I don't think when he's healthy and playing, he's a top 5 goalie in the NHL right now. And you're talking about being without him for potentially 2 or maybe even close to 3 months, like Tyler Sagan. Those are two of the Stars' most impactful players, especially when they're fully healthy. I mean, those are two guys that can sway games here and there. And so to be without them is going to be a big loss for the Stars team. I know, in terms of long-term impact, I don't know how much of an impact it's going to have on them in a potential postseason return. I think they still have a lot of good firepower, but that Ben Bishop injury really starts to call some things into question, not because you don't necessarily trust the guys you have backing him up, but it's a completely different and a new environment for everybody, for the Stars, for Anthony Dobin, for Jake Ottinger. It's a new environment for everybody.
Right, absolutely. And as you mentioned, these are two former All-Stars, for this team. And these are, you've got a Vezina Trophy finalist just 2 years removed from that, and Ben Bishop. You've got Tyler Sagan, who was a 40-goal scorer 2 years ago, played the entire playoffs with this torn labrum, or I guess 3 years ago, not this season or last season, but the season before. Regardless, my mind is it's on other things right now, Kenneth. Who would have guessed? My math skills, it's late. But regardless, as you said, this is a pretty hefty blow in the crease and up front for the Stars on that top line, where Sagan has become a mainstay, Kenneth, for this Dallas Stars team since joining the team via trade in 2013. And, that 5-month window, like you said, Bishop surgery was October 21st. Now, on the bright side, Jim Nill did say that they expect both players to make a full recovery and be back to 100%. But with Bishop's surgery on October 21st, Kenneth, 5 months, you jump ahead 5 months, that's March 21st. And if the NHL does get the season going on January 1st, which is still their target date, again, there's a lot of questioning and suspicion about whether they can actually pull that off or not, considering they still have to figure out how they're going to make a season happen, after bubble hockey in the summer of 2020. But Kenneth, if you start January 1st, that is, what are we talking here? Almost 3 full months without Ben Bishop, without your starting goaltender.
Yep.
And then Tyler Sagan's even further. November 2nd, 5 months from that is April 2nd. So this is definitely a blow, Kenneth. But on the bright side, when you look at this Dallas Stars team, it seems as though they have the pieces in place to fill the voids, maybe not 100%, considering just how big of an impact both those players have on this team, but filling it just enough to keep the team competitive, keep the team rolling along, to be ready to insert them back in that final push towards the Stanley Cup playoffs in the spring, March and April, which we're hoping will be that final push to the playoffs, assuming this regular season does get underway in the early part of January or February. So plenty more to talk about on Ben Bishop, on Tyler Sagan, on who's going to fill in for them and who's going to shift up the depth chart. We'll talk more about that right around the corner when the Locked On Stars podcast continues in a moment.
Before we get to the rest of our episode, if you're like me, you have a wall throughout your day that you've got to break through. Maybe it's mental, maybe it's physical.
Yeah.
Maybe you're sitting at work, it's that late afternoon feeling and you're ready to wrap things up, but you need a little energy boost. If you need that breakthrough that wall, look no further than Built Go. These 1.5 ounce packages are easy to toss in a briefcase. Maybe you're going out to play golf. Maybe throw it in the bag for the back nine. You need a little bit of a boost. Whatever you need to break through your wall, Built Go is there for you. It's like those energy, 5-hour energy, but without the same crash feeling. They've got 3 great flavors: peanut butter, honey, chocolate, coconut, and chocolate mint. Built Go is made with collagen protein, which is fast absorbing, so it gets into your system fast. Plus, it's easy on the stomach. It's loaded with good stuff that ignites your work, including beta-alanine, B3, honey, and a kick of caffeine. If you've got a wall through that you need a breakthrough, look no further than Built Go. Our listeners right now can go to BuiltGo.com, use promo code LOCKED, and get 20% off their next order. That's promo code LOCKED for 20% off at BuiltGo.com.
And we're back here at the Locked On Stars podcast, wishing you all a happy and healthy Thursday. Kenneth, the week's almost over. The first week of November is almost over. This month's flying by. This autumn season is flying by. But hey, we're almost done with 2020, so that's something. That's a
something. Yeah, something. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
Something.
I think that's where we're going to leave it.
Yeah. But regardless, we're here talking about Dallas Stars injury updates, pretty significant ones coming out on Tuesday afternoon from the Stars on a press release. Tyler Sagan and Ben Bishop both undergoing surgeries over the past 2 weeks. Ben Bishop having surgery on his right knee, and Tyler Sagan having surgery, a right hip arthroscopy and labral repair. So, Kenneth, you've got a torn meniscus for Ben Bishop. You had a torn labrum for Tyler Sagan, and both are now out for 5 months. Now, we've got a few more minutes in this episode down one by one because we don't want to overlap, talk about 2 players at once. So let's start in the back. Let's start in the crease with Ben Bishop because this is, as we said, the one that came as the most the most shocking, rather. You go back to October 6th or October 8th, I guess it was, when Jim Nill has his end-of-season media availability saying that after going through a long list of injury updates for this team, saying that Tyler Sagan was probably the only one that was going to miss or not be available, rather, for a January 1st start date. But now Ben Bishop certainly will not be ready for a January 1st start date after having torn meniscus fully repaired. As Matthew DeFranks from the Dallas Morning News, good friend of the Locked On Stars podcast, Matt DeFranks tweeted out, he got a chance to talk with Jim Nill on Tuesday, and he said Ben Bishop's meniscus wasn't as bad as when he had his first knee surgery in May, Jim Nill said, but after MRIs and second opinions revealed a torn meniscus, surgery was necessary to fix it. And so now, Kenneth, it's kind of a shock. The Stars really maybe weren't expecting this at first, even 15 days before the surgery or 13 days, when Nill was talking to the media, he didn't expect that his number one goaltender was going to be out for the first couple months of the season.
No, he didn't. And something about those pesky torn menisci in Dallas sports, right? First Kristaps Porzingis for the Mavericks, and now Ben Bishop for the Stars. But yeah, this is of the two, I would lean towards this one being the more impactful in terms of the season, and that's not to discredit Tyler Sagan. I think he's incredibly important, but when you're talking about positionally, you're talking about a difference between having one guy where there's nobody, your backup is the only one that makes up the slack. There's nobody else on the ice that can really make up the slack for not having Ben Bishop, so to speak. Your defense can obviously be a little bit better here and there, but as a whole, there's no other goalies. There's no anybody else that's going to make saves, right? Yeah. Whereas you flip it, and there's other people who can produce goals for short periods of time. They can get you through games. So I think on the surface, this is the bigger of the two losses, especially because it was a little bit unexpected. And not only are you down Ben Bishop, but now, more importantly, I think you're putting Anton Khudobin into an environment, into a situation he's never really been in. And I know people may say, okay, well, look at how much he played in the postseason. He was great for most of the postseason. Yeah. But even then, you could see at times the fatigue start to wear on him. And you're not talking about a postseason where he's had 3 months, technically 3 months off, and now he's going to be the primary goalie for a few weeks or a couple months-ish. Yeah. No, now you're talking about he's going into the season for potentially up to 3 months as the primary goalie. And it's not going to be a 1A, 1B situation either, I don't think. As much as I think Jake Ottinger is a talented young goalie, and from what I've seen, I'm pretty high on Jake Ottinger's future. It's not going to be Ben Bishop was 1A, now Anton Hudobin's 1A, and since Anton Hudobin was 1B, Jake Ottinger's 1B. It's not going to be that. It's going to be Anton Hudobin's number 1 and Jake Ottinger's the backup. And that's it's a strange environment because Anton Hudobin has never, ever had to face that. He's never in his career had to face that kind of role where he was the primary guy. He's going to be starting, what do you say, just 3/4 of the games, Josh, something along those lines?
And that's a good question because, of course, we still have the whole uncertainty about when the season's going to start. So is Ben Bishop going to miss 3 months? Is he, 2 months and 3 weeks? Is he going to miss 1 month and 3 weeks? And how many games are going to be in that realm? Because, of course, in the NHL, there's typically anywhere from 12 to 15 games in a given month. But then if you're talking about condensing the schedule to try and get you back on pace for an October start in 2021, 2022, then you're talking about maybe 16, 17, 18 games in a month. You're talking about that. And as you said, Jake Ottinger has 2 games under his belt, 2 NHL games, and they were both putting him in when they knew the game was over. When they knew when the Stars were down 3, 4, 5 goals, putting him in for Anton Hudobin in a playoff game against the Colorado Avalanche and against the Vegas Golden Knights and against the Tampa Bay Lightning, right?
That sounds correct.
Yeah, correct.
That sounds correct.
Yeah. So putting him in, he gets 1 game against Vegas, 1 game against Tampa Bay, and not even a game, a period each. So that just leads to the main point. You can't expect him to be a 1B. It's just not going to happen. Now, he does seem NHL ready. The management, the coaching staff, they're both confident in him that he can be an NHL goaltender. Jim Nill even said the day before free agency, they were more than comfortable. If Anton Hudobin signed elsewhere in free agency, they were more than comfortable rolling with Ben Bishop and Jake Ottinger next to now we know it's a good idea. Good thing they re-signed Anton Hudobin. That signing just became 454 times, that's an exact number, by the way, 454 times more valuable than had they not re-signed him on October 9th. But like you said, you can't expect Ottinger to play 40% of the games. 30 is probably more a pretty good margin, 30, 25, 35%, somewhere around there. I would say, if you're missing Ben Bishop for, let's say, 45 games, Jake Ottinger can probably play 15 of those. But then if you can you're going to have Anton Hudobin play 30 of 45. And like you said, Kenneth, the most games he's ever played in a given season was his first season with the Stars. He played in 41 games. Before that, next closest total is 36 back in 13-14, 34 back in 14-15. So you're talking about him playing well over half the season for this team. And at that point, can he do it? I think he can. You saw him do it in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And so I don't think the Stars are too worried to have him as their starter for rolling for the first few months while Ben Bishop fully recovers. But at the same time, it's interesting that Anton Hudobin's going to have to play a role, like you said, that he's never played before in an NHL regular season.
Yeah, and I think the simple way to break it down, in my mind at least, and I know that there were some people out there that believe that the difference between Ben Bishop and Anton Hudobin is really not that great. I still am one that I think, all things aside, fully healthy, Ben Bishop's a top 5 goalie in the NHL, and Anton Hudobin's somewhere in the 10 to 15 range, which is still very, very good.
Yeah.
But I think you're talking about a fairly significant drop off. And I think what's made the Stars so good is that there's that intangible of that confidence of knowing any given night they're throwing out one of the top 15 goalies, top 10 goalies in the NHL, regardless of who's in net. And I think that improves not only the play in front of the goalie, but I think it improves Ben Bishop and Anton Hudobin. So that whole dynamic is shifted. So now you go from a top 5 and maybe let's say top 12, somewhere in around there. I think he's somewhere in the maybe 12 to 13 range.
Somewhere in
top 5. Yeah, somewhere in there. Now you're going to a top 12 to 13 and a rookie who's never really played, save for 2 periods and blowouts.
Yeah,
exactly. So, and as talented as you think he is, that's a complete unknown. You literally have no idea how good he's going to be over the course of a certain amount of time. So, the one, if there's a positive takeaway, it's that obviously Anton Hudobin did take on a fairly significant workload, and that's putting it lightly, in the postseason.
Yeah.
And for a lot of the postseason, I don't think he was necessarily his best self. There were times that he was. Definitely. I think the Vegas series,
best self. I would argue.
But there was times you could see the fatigue happening. But as a whole, when you go, start to finish, I think he was very much up to the task. And if he translates that to the regular season, I think the Stars are in good shape. So there's the positive. It's hard to translate, though, what was one of the weirdest postseasons you're ever going to see, probably the strangest you're ever going to see, to a regular season that's also going to be incredibly unique. One thing to touch on really quickly is it does make all of this does make the Landon Bow signing completely, now it makes 100% sense.
A lot of sense.
Yeah, because when they signed Landon Bow, we were kind of going, okay, well, it's a depth, give some competition. Maybe they're expecting Jake Ottinger to kind of float back and forth, especially if there's a condensed schedule. And now it makes 100% sense, right? He was signed to be the backup with the Texas Stars because Colton Point was going to have to be the starter, because Jake Ottinger was going to be in the NHL, because Ben Bishop was going to be out. It's that domino effect. Exactly. Now that we know that domino effect, it makes 100% sense. So I don't think the Stars are in awful shape. They're still, I think even Jake Ottinger and Anton Hudobin's roughly a top, 20-ish goalie tandem in the NHL, which isn't bad considering you're talking about still, I think, one of the top 5 defenseman groups in the NHL for the Stars. But it is a difference that they're going to have to figure out how to adapt, and you're going to have to sit there and really hope that Anton Hudobin can bring back the A game you saw during this past postseason.
Yeah, and Landon Bow, obviously, you could even make the case that he is the now 4th string goalie on the Stars depth chart, with Ben Bishop, and Hudobin, and Jake Ottinger as the top 3. But Landon Bow, as you know, has spent 4 seasons with the organization, with the Texas Stars specifically. And for 2 of those seasons, he was the 1A. He was the go-to starter for the Texas Stars, and even played a few NHL games for the Stars in 2018-19. So Landon Bow has that opportunity to be that first stringer for the Texas Stars, and he was signed just 3 days after Ben Bishop's surgery. So it makes sense, as you said, Kent. Certainly, it all fills out. Everything falls into place. But as we said, Anton Hudobin has shown that he can be a starter for this team in the most important moments of a season. And then Jake Ottinger. Coaches are high on him, management's high on him, and Jake Ottinger feels like he's ready to take on an NHL role. He's talked about it. And so it'll be exciting. I think it's exciting, and I think the Stars are in pretty good position to manage the Ben Bishop injury, at least for right now. Coming up, we'll talk about Tyler Sagan's injury, and we'll talk about how the Stars might end up filling that void when the Locked On Stars podcast continues in a moment. And we're back here at the Locked On Stars podcast. And Kent, I think we may have to point out, for all of our visual listeners, tune-inners, viewers. That's the one. For all of our viewers on Tegna on WFAA.com, when we pause like that, we're not freezing. We're not like checking out mentally. When we pause, that's for our audio side of things, when we insert ads into our ad breaks. So, and for all of our audio listeners, disregard this message. But for the visual, for our viewers, don't worry. When we say we'll be back in a minute and we just freeze, we don't think that the camera's off. We don't think that we're like, it's time to take a break. It's just for continuity's sake. But regardless, back to the Dallas Stars, back to injuries, back to Tyler Sagan. We just talked about Ben Bishop, how the Stars are going to manage his 5-month absence after surgery and a torn meniscus on October 21st. How the Stars are going to manage that for the next, and also, Ken, something else that we need to mention before we leave the Ben Bishop topic. Matt DeFranks from the Dallas Morning News also tweeting from his chat with Jim Nill. He had asked the question, did practicing and playing during the playoffs contribute to the tear? Nill said, I don't think that mattered. Just a little bit of an older guy, just wear and tear of being a goalie, and that's just part of the job. So don't know if playing those 3 games and practicing with the team for a couple weeks did any more damage to an already torn meniscus, or if who knows? There's no way of telling. There's no way of knowing now, regardless. But certainly 5 months without him, Anton Hudobin and Jake Ottinger are going to have to step up, carry the load, help this Stars team be in a position to run at the playoffs by the time Ben Bishop returns. And it seems as though both of them are at least ready for the task, Kenneth. And it'll be fun to see how the Stars manage that, how they manage both workloads, and how both goalies respond. But now up to the top line of the Dallas Stars forward group, Tyler Sagan out for 5 months. And with a torn labrum, Kenneth, a torn labrum that he played through the Stanley Cup playoffs with, ended up having 26 games played. He only missed 1 game of the entire Stanley Cup playoffs. And of course, as many fans pointed out throughout the playoff run, and analysts and broadcast crews, Tyler Sagan's point production wasn't there, Kenneth. But you try playing on a torn labrum and tell me how it goes. Tell me how it goes when you're trying to put the puck in the back of the net in a Stanley Cup playoff game. Get back to me on that. But anyways, all that aside, now with Sagan getting to where he can make a full recovery and be back in the Stars lineup, be back to that top line center caliber that the Stars are expecting him to be and need him to be for the next few seasons. Where do they go from here? It's interesting because it seems like they could go 2 or 3 different ways in filling the void for Tyler Sagan.
Yeah, it does, and I hope, I don't know what our time is, so I hope we get have a couple minutes to spend on this. But I think the interesting thing is
quick here. We got 2 minutes.
We got 2 minutes. Oh man, we're gonna speed through this. All right. I think that the thing the fans want to see is Ty Dellandrea, right? That's what I think a lot of fans want to see, and who they want to see replacing Tyler Sagan. That being said, it's gonna be a competition, right? They've got some forward depth that they can kind of play with. I think the 2 names that are going to be kind of duking it out are Ty Dellandrea and Justin Dowling. For those Tyler Sagan minutes. The benefit of Tyler, I say the benefit, that was poorly worded. I think the reason I value the loss of Ben Bishop a little bit ahead of Tyler Sagan is I think there's more room to make up Tyler Sagan's difference, especially when I think you're going to see more for Rope Hintz this year. I think you're going to see another step forward from Denis Gurianov. I think you're going to see, Joe Pavelski started to find some form there in the postseason. I think he can translate that over. Plus, you're talking about that if you're getting the production you got from your D-man group during the regular season, the production you got from them in the postseason, this upcoming regular season, that's a big difference maker as well. So I think it's going to be a battle between Dellandrea and Dowling, and I frame it like this. I think if you're going to try to if your goal is to replace the most percentage of Tyler Sagan's production possible and value possible, then I think that's Ty Dellandrea. But that's a much more volatile choice, I think, at this point, because while I think you have a higher percentage of replacing a Tyler Sagan level production from Ty Dellandrea than Justin Dowling, you also have a higher chance of losing out on a lot more production with Ty Dellandrea. I think there's a little less consistency there. Justin Dowling, of course, not necessarily going to move the needle as much as maybe a Ty Dellandrea would, but we've seen him around the NHL. We've seen him with the Dallas Stars. We've seen him be productive. We've seen him play an important role. So, I don't think necessarily the upside's is high, but I think the baseline is more steady with Justin Dowling. And the question is going to be which one of them earns that spot in training camp, and then it's going to be something to monitor during the regular season. Which one of them, whoever gets that job kind of out of camp, and maybe it's a rotation thing, we don't know. But whichever one gets the primary allotment of minutes, it's going to be something to follow. If Ty Dellandrea is not playing very well, there's a reason to go to Justin Dowling, and that is a little bit more of that experience, a little bit more of that consistency.
Yeah, and the rotation might end up being needed simply because of the condensed schedule that's being reported that the NHL will likely have, and the Stars will likely have to face. And Kenneth, you also have a chance where you could just play kind of a short leash game where you let one guy get in on the fourth line and start contributing. If he starts rolling, leave him in, let him roll with it. But if he's struggling, if he's not able to contribute, produce, help his line along, you have an easy chance to flip. And that's what we're talking about, obviously. Justin Dowling and Ty Dellandrea. The Stars do have a lot of center depth. Joe Pavelski, of course, Rope Hintz, Radek Faksa, Jason Dickinson. All of those guys are either natural centers or they are at least really good and really solid at playing the center position. So the Stars have 4 good options there. Then, as we mentioned, Justin Dowling and Ty Dellandrea, also solid options. And if you're talking about filling the voids for Matthias Janmark and Corey Perry, you've got names like Jason Robertson, Nick Camano could also slot into the lineup somewhere. So, Kenneth, you could see a Joe Pavelski, Rope Hintz, Radek Faksa, Justin Dowling, or Ty Dellandrea. You could see Jason Dickinson centering that fourth line. The Stars seem to have a number of options for that fourth line spot as you kind of shift everyone else up to fill in for Sagan's spot and fill in on the second and third lines. It seems like the Stars have options, and that's a good thing because it's not unnatural, especially whether it's Rick Bowness or Jim Montgomery or whoever else. It's not unnatural over the past 2 years to see Justin Dowling on the top line, to see Jason Dickinson on the top line. I mean, you've seen these guys skating with Jamie Benn, skating with Tyler Sagan on the wing. There's a number of combinations that the Stars could end up rolling out, and especially in a weird season that's condensed, it's going to play to the Stars' advantage to have a lot of NHL-ready forwards, or at least forwards knocking on the door that are ready to make an NHL impact. And with Tyler Sagan's injury and Ben Bishop's injury, the doors of opportunity are open for especially younger guys and prospects to make their stamp and earn their spot. Almost, you think back how easy it is to earn a spot, Kenneth. Game 7 of the second round against Colorado Avalanche. Joel Kiviranta all but solidified that he was a Dallas Star going forward in that one game. And it's all about taking advantage of your opportunity. So should be fun to see. It should be fun to monitor as the season gets going, as training camp gets going, and see just where the Stars are going to go with these guys. But for now, it seems like they have the pieces in-house to fill those spots.
Yeah, it does. And this is going to be something to kind of talk about over time, because you can really start to dive in, especially the Sagan one. The Ben Bishop one, we kind of know what the solution is going to be. The debate is how well is that going to work out. Right. The Sagan one's one where there's a lot of different combinations you could see. Some are sexy, title Andrea, we're going to get the top prospect in there. And some of them are, maybe not as fun to talk about, but maybe a little bit more stable. So It'll be interesting. That's something to kind of keep talking about and talking through those options moving forward. But at the end of the day, these are two big losses for this Dallas Stars team.
Absolutely. I mean, as we've said, all Stars, 2 award finalists in their time with Dallas, 2 guys that the Stars have under contract for a long time. Ben Bishop for 3 more years. Tyler Sagan just finished the first year of an 8-year deal, right? So 7 more years for Tyler Sagan. Mm-hmm. So lots of time left on these guys, still looking to make huge impacts. And once they make full recovery, the expectation is that they will have large impacts moving forward for this team as they try and run it back, Kenneth, get back to the Stanley Cup final into a 2020-2021 season. Although it's all going to be likely played in 2021. There's really no point to tack on that 2020 mark. But we want to forget about 2020 anyway. So no big deal. But other than that, that's about all we've got for this Thursday episode, Kenneth, on visual, on audio, on a little bit of everything. But any final thoughts for us before we close up?
As always, if you haven't and you're watching us for the first time on WFA, or maybe you watched a couple times, but you haven't gotten a chance to yet, go check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you listen to your podcasts. We are there. Make sure to go listen to us, hit subscribe. We are normally a daily format podcast. During the off season, we're 3 times a week. So we're still going to be here consistently, giving you all the news, opinions, analysis, insights, everything you could need for the Dallas Stars this offseason. And then when training camp gears up, we'll be back to a daily format weekday podcast. So make sure you hit subscribe so we show up in your feed every time we drop a new episode. And if you haven't already, follow us on Twitter at Locked On Stars, and also follow our personal accounts as well. If you look below, I am at Kenneth_Nash19 and Josh is at Josh_Clark02. And for all of our listeners via the audio format, keep doing what you're doing. We appreciate the support. And if you haven't, you should hit subscribe too.
We love y'all. That's all I have to say, Kenneth. But other than that, have a great Thursday. We will talk to you all again on Friday in our 3rd episode of the week, only on audio-based platforms, I guess. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Only on audio form. But we'll be back next week here at WFAA on video form as well. But until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk to you all tomorrow.